It was our privilege to be the last group of Selkirk College nursing students invited by our practice partners to embark on the international practice experience in Guatemala, a tropical country located in Central America. Our group consisted of 7 members, and we were accompanied by 2 truly amazing and inspiring people, Marianne Morris and Michael Chapman. We were called to this practicum with the intention to expand our nursing practice beyond the narrow parameters of the hospital and to learn about the implications of poverty, social injustice, and inequity on the health and well-being of community on a global scale. This practicum was structured around the social determinants of health, Indigenous health, gender equality, and social justice. We were welcomed by many grassroots organizations in Guatemala City, La Esmeralda, El Estor, and finally, the Cooperative of Nuevo Horizonte. Each of these partnerships allowed us a unique opportunity to gain an understanding of the history of the communities, challenges they have experienced and continue to endure, and their efforts in initiatives to promote community capacity building. From the moment we arrived in Guatemala City, we hit the ground running. Day 1 was action-packed. On our first day, we went to Casa del Memoria, a museum where we were welcomed to learn the centuries-old policies of social and economic marginalization, dating back to the Spanish conquest and ending with the Civil War in 1996. A history of racism and marginalization of Indigenous people have resulted in disproportionate targeting and healthcare disparities of Indigenous populations in Guatemala. Here we learned that 83% of the 2 million victims of the Civil War belonged to Indigenous groups. Following our trip to the museum, we were left feeling shocked that such harmful disparities still exist to this day in Guatemala. It was during this day that we were introduced to the gravity of the current oppression and marginalization of Indigenous populations, which was balanced by the vibrant, welcoming, and energetic people we met who were taking the time to teach us about their culture, language, and history.
During our time in Guatemala, we were struck by the resiliency and strength that was exhibited by many of the youth that we met. In Guatemala, there is not much opportunity for children and youth to get ahead in the world if they are born into poverty. Youth are forced to put their own safety at risk to stand up for their human rights and help support their families. The first practice partner we met while in Guatemala was the Asociación de Mujeres en Solidaridad, or AMES. Located in Guatemala City, AMES fights for the rights of women within the workforce, as well as supports the sexual and reproductive health of its community by providing a clinic that offers low-cost medical fees and options for family planning. Additionally, AMES has developed an auxiliary nursing program for youth and young adults to help them create a better life for themselves and their families. The individuals who attend this program are often factory workers, sex trade workers, and people living in extreme poverty. While in Guatemala, we were able to provide an all-day diabetes teaching session to the nurses in training. We were struck by their incredible dedication and desire to learn. Some of the students had traveled for hours to attend, and others arrived after working all night. We all left the education session feeling humbled and grateful for the opportunities that we have here in Canada. The tenacity of the youth that we met was also evident when we visited San Rafael Las Flores, a small community located a couple hours away from Guatemala City. Just outside of San Rafael, a Canadian mine owned by Pan American Silver, a Vancouver-based mining company, had in recent years been shut down due to the peaceful 24/7 protests being held by the surrounding Indigenous communities. While in operation, the mine had devastated the surrounding communities, ruining both infrastructure and farmlands. While we visited the protest, we were inspired to see so many young people standing up for their lands as well as for the health and well-being of themselves and their families, even if it meant putting their own safety at risk. One example of this was Louis, a young Indigenous man who had been shot in the face and nearly killed by security guards of the mine while peacefully protesting. Additionally, we heard the story of a 16-year-old girl who had also been shot and killed while leaving a rally against the mine. Another example of a particularly horrific violation of the rights of youth occurred in Guatemala City in 2017. On March 7th of that year, youth living in a state group home staged a mass escape in protest of the inhumane conditions that they were being forced to live in. Officials rounded up the youth, separated them by gender, and detained them in 2 different locations. 54 girls were forced into a small crowded classroom. During the night, a fire broke out. The girls banged on the door and pleaded to come out, but officials guarding the door did nothing. 41 of the 54 girls perished in the fire. The rest were left with psychological and physical scars. Our hearts broke while hearing this story. After meeting with 2 women who selflessly volunteered their time to support the victims and their families, we collectively decided we would like to gift the beautiful quilts and pillowcases we had brought with us, made by the Selkirk Quilting Guild, to the victims and their families. After seeing the immense hardships that youth are faced with in many parts of Guatemala, we are inspired to see a variety of different opportunities for children and youth when we visited the Cooperative of Nuevo Horizonte. In Guatemala, education is only free until grade 6. However, in Nuevo Horizonte, children are encouraged to attend school. The opportunity to pursue education beyond grade 6 is made possible by the scholarships provided by Bienestar. Moving forward, it is imperative to continue to advocate for the health and well-being of the children and youth of Guatemala by supporting programs such as the ones developed by AMES and Nuevo Horizonte.
Throughout our trip to Guatemala, we were confronted with the real-life consequences of the current environmental crisis. During this time, we witnessed the severe implications of current international mining practices. Our practice partner, AMES, invited us to visit the community of Chinautla, in which they send graduates from their auxiliary nursing program to engage in health promotion by educating and supporting people in their reproductive rights. Chinautla was one of the first places in which we saw environmental devastation and its implications on the health and well-being of the population. A once thriving and lush river valley had been consumed by garbage, sewage, and runoff from factories, which had polluted the water sources and presented the community with a plethora of health concerns. In addition to Chinautla, San Rafael and El Astor were 2 other communities in which we were exposed to the severe consequences that mining has on the lives and rights of the people. Through their stories, they fiercely encouraged us to reflect on the global ramifications of environmental exploitation associated with extractive resources, such as decreased access to water, soil erosion, as well as water and air pollution. In Canada, our natural resources and societal structure currently distance us from the real consequences of climate change. However, as we witnessed, the lives of people in Guatemala are already being impacted. A few years ago, a women's group was established in El Astor in order to promote female empowerment through a variety of community projects. The women chose to raise chickens as an efficient means of financial support. However, we were informed that in the last year, all the chickens had perished due to rising temperatures, and therefore the women were forced to adapt to raising pigs.
Our experiences in Chinautla, San Rafael, and El Astor left us feeling uncertain about the well-being of our global community. Thankfully, our experience in the Cooperative of Nuevo Horizonte instilled new hope. We were introduced to some incredible initiatives being taken on by the community. The reforestation project, for instance, was a refreshing representation of individuals coming together to promote the health of both the community and the environment. The cooperative reclaimed 145 hectares of barren land and replanted a forest with a focus on environmental health rather than economic gain. Additionally, they have begun to decrease the amount of land designated for their cattle project in order to plant another 90 hectares of trees that are indigenous to that area. The efforts of the Cooperative of Nuevo Horizonte and their commitment to environmental retribution was inspiring, leaving us feeling hopeful that change is attainable. As future nurses, we have a role to promote climate change adaptation and mitigation in order to protect the well-being of our clients. As Canadians, we have the responsibility to hold Canadian companies accountable for their actions. This trip highlighted the urgency of the environmental situation and the necessity for immediate action.
In addition to environmental devastation, our time in Guatemala demonstrated to us how various large international corporations are exploiting Latin American resources and perpetuating poverty. This part of the story of our northern role in creating conditions that fuel poverty and contribute to migration is often not told in mainstream media. Instead, migrants are represented as a faceless mass of people who are trying to sneak into our country to exploit our resources. This is what our governments would like us to believe. While in Guatemala, we had the privilege of shaping our own picture of migration by meeting remarkable people whose lives were uprooted by multinational corporations, governments, poverty, and ultimately migration. While in La Esmeralda, we met with Naomi, the representative of the Mayans People Clinic, one of our practice partners. It was evident that the community of La Esmeralda had many strengths, primarily strong family connections. However, this community also had challenges. Specifically, they were greatly affected by poverty. While we were there, one of the stories shared with us was how Naomi's daughter had recently had a baby. The healthy baby was born from a very complicated delivery, which had cost the family thousands of dollars. In order to pay for the cost of this delivery, the baby's father had gone to Mexico to find work. Because of poverty and lack of work, this father was missing the first year of his son's life.
While staying at the Cooperative of Nuevo Horizonte, we traveled to Flores, where we had the privilege to spend our day helping out at the Casa de Migrante. It was here where we met the people behind the media's misrepresentation of migration. Casa de Migrante is a UN-funded safe house run exclusively by volunteers for migrants traveling through Guatemala from countries such as El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua, en route to Mexico or the US. Here, migrants who had been traveling for days on foot, with little or no sleep, no money in their pockets, or a change of clothes, found sanctuary. They were finally able to rest their eyes in a place with hot food, a shower, safety, and a roof over their heads for up to 72 hours. The space included male, female, family, and LGBTQ dorms, a space for children equipped with games and toys, and a large outdoor garden. After we spent the day sweeping, cooking, dusting, and cleaning bathrooms, we sat in the cool of the courtyard. As the sun set with a group of migrants who had just arrived, they shared with us their stories of their families, struggles, and dreams. We met young men who chose the risks of migrating over the guarantee of being recruited into a gang in their home country. They left their families and their homes with nothing but the hope that they would find opportunities for work. One man, who was fluent in English, told us that he had been living illegally in New York since he was a child. Last year, he was discovered and deported back to Honduras, where violent gangs threatened his life. He was migrating again in the hope of returning to the life he had built in the U.S. We also spoke with a father who was taking on this perilous journey with his 10-year-old son. The stress of undertaking this journey was huge on its own. The added pressure of being responsible for the safety of his child was evident on this father's face and in the words he spoke to us. Each person, the majority of whom were young men, though women were also represented, spoke of the toxic combination of abject poverty, lack of hope for any change in the future, and the terrifying fear of gangs that permeates their daily lives and motivates them to risk everything with the slim chance that they would be the lucky ones to reach the United States. We concluded our courtyard conversation by saying our next stop was the Canadian Embassy, where we would be presenting a report on what we had seen and learned while in Guatemala. We asked the group of migrants if there was anything they would like us to say on their behalf. Their unanimous response was the urgent need for work. They just wanted to earn money to support their families. That is all.
Throughout our trip, we observed many aspects of health and health promotion. For example, during our time in the cooperative of Nuevo Horizonte, we were able to meet and collaborate with the diabetes health promoters. With support from Bienestar, the health promoters have been able to make changes on a personal and community level, empowering their clients to make their own health decisions. Specifically, the health promoters have recently enacted 3 programs, which encompasses providing education at the local elementary school, hosting a children's club, and a people living with diabetes club. The prevalence of diabetes among the Guatemalan population is 8.4%, which is 2.2% higher than that of Canada. While being on the ground in Nuevo Horizonte, we were able to see how diabetes has impacted this community while evaluating the importance of these newly running programs. We had the opportunity to sit in on one of the People Living with Diabetes Club, where each member of the group expressed their gratitude towards the health promoters and this club. One member of the community stated how during the war they all relied on each other, but as they moved into this cooperative, they began living separate lives. This club has allowed her to break out of her isolation and find strength as a whole. The health promoters host a kids club once a week that aims to provide upstream health promotion with the goal of supporting healthy habits that will better enable the children to prevent or defer the onset of chronic health challenges such as diabetes. When we attended this club, it was inspiring to observe how confident and enlightened these children were when creating and critiquing imaginary meals. We were so impressed to see children who had a deep understanding of what portion sizes and nutritional value, especially when compared to Canadian children we have worked with. We saw firsthand how effective the group is doing in creating healthier habits for children.
Throughout our trip, we provided dental health education to elementary school-age children in communities such as La Esmeralda, El Astor, and the Cooperative of Nuevo Horizonte. We educated these communities on proper toothbrushing, hand washing, and food that was beneficial or damaging to dental health. Additionally, through generous donations received back in Canada, we were able to provide dental care and other hygienic supplies to the communities. In the Cooperative of Nuevo Horizonte, we observed the positive impacts health promotion had on the youth. During one of our teaching sessions, every student held a water bottle and strongly ever denied drinking sugary drinks such as Coca-Cola. In contrast, we observed several areas of poverty in La Esmeralda that reflected on poor dental health. This included bleeding of the gums during toothbrushing, blackened, rotten teeth, and how children would refer to Coca-Cola as water. In the face of these challenges, our education and donations have provided insight to how they can make healthier choices. Despite this being the last trip of the Selkirk nursing students, the principal of this school showed immense gratitude towards our work. He believed that although this was the end, another door was waiting to open for them, as they always believe that good things are coming. We look forward to the work that Bienestar continues to do within the communities of Guatemala.
The learning from this experience was immense and has shaped our lives and will continue to do so throughout our careers. Our challenge in coming home was taking everything that we saw and learned in Guatemala and making it fit into our comfortable life today. Being here in this room, sharing our stories today, and supporting Bienestar has helped us stay connected to what we learned and experienced. We will never forget the gratitude, generosity, and resiliency we were welcomed with, and ultimately, it is the people that we will never forget.